Hello, I'm Jennifer Moore, Regional Specialist with the Food Protection and Facilities Branch, and I'm going to go over rules governing the sanitation of resident camps with you today. This course is designed to give an overview of the rules governing the sanitation of resident camps, and it will include information about the rules and how to document violations on the inspection form. First, you have a picture of the cover of the rule book. This is very common. This is the look of the cover of all the rule books that are found on our website. And they are listed under the Administrative Code information there in the middle, 15A NCAC 18A.3600. You will hear these referred to as the 3600 rules. All of our rules have a number like that associated with them. Please make sure that you have a copy of these rules and an inspection form, and the number for that is 3601 to reference during this presentation. There is a link to these rules on the North Carolina Division of Environmental Health website. So we start with our definitions. A resident camp includes camp establishments which provide food and overnight lodging for 72 consecutive hours or more per week. There's a permanent base of operations for groups of children or adults who are engaged in the recreational or educational programs. There is a permanent connection to a public electrical service provider. Programs are operated and staffed by the camp, and supervision of individual campers is the camp responsibility. This definition does not include campgrounds or other facilities that only rent property or campsites for camping. The definition does not include primitive experience camps. They are under the 3500 rules, and this definition does not include, it does include children's foster care camps and residential therapeutic or habilitative camps. So those type of camps, they are a residential treatment facility that provided in a camping environment. It's designed to help individuals develop behavior control, coping skills, self-esteem, and interpersonal skills as defined in General Statute 122C and 10A NCAC 27G. That's the 5200 rules there. Therapeutic camps are licensed by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, the Division of Health Service Regulation, and there are general statutes that cover their information as well. Foster care camps are a residential child care facility which provide foster care at either a permanent campsite or in maybe a wilderness setting. Those are also defined in general statutes in 131D, and the administrative code numbers for that is 0100. Children's foster care camps are licensed by the Department of Health and Human Services, the Division of Health Service Regulation, also in accordance with General Statutes 131D and the 0100 rules. A limited resident camp means a resident camp that is limited to a total of 90 campers and staff per session. A limited resident camp has to comply with the rules of this section except for Rule 3628D, which you will see later in the presentation, for all of their equipment excluding required dishwashing facilities. An operator of a proposed camp should submit plans drawn to scale as well as a topographic map showing buildings and equipment, water supply system, wastewater disposal system, and recreational waters. This should be submitted to the health department of the county where the site is located. The plans drawn to scale and specifications are also to be submitted to the local health department for any additions or renovations to existing buildings, any new buildings or facilities in existing resident camps. So they should always submit plans and show what they are planning to do, whether it's a new camp or an existing camp going under a renovation or a remodel. The local health department should require that the camp submit that topographic map upon determination that proposed changes will impact the sanitation or drinking water supplies. Construction shall not start until the plans and specifications are approved by the health department. Permits are required to operate a resident camp, except for a camp licensed by the Division of Health Service Regulation, which we just mentioned in the previous slide. So a valid permit must be obtained in order to operate a resident camp. the permits to operate are not to be issued until an evaluation by the department or its authorized agent shows that the resident camp complies with the requirements of this section. So prior to opening, a resident camp operator should provide to the local health department written documentation that the equipment needed to maintain required food temperatures is operational, clean, and sanitized, that all other equipment and utensils are operational, clean, and sanitized as required. Dish machines, if present, are clean and operating properly, and kitchen and lodging facilities are in good repair, clean, and free of vermin. A seasonal permit can be obtained. A resident camp that operates 6 months or less per calendar year and does not offer activities, programs, services, or food to the public for pay during the remaining 6 months should obtain a seasonal permit, and it should be for their operating season in this order. Camps have to submit in writing the information for a seasonal permit, including the name of the camp owner, the responsible person, the physical and billing addresses of the camp, so the demographics that are needed, the planned dates of operation, the capacity of the camp, including campers and staff, at least 45 days prior to the scheduled opening session. This should be submitted. The seasonal permit shall include the dates of operation and shall expire 6 months from the date of issuance. So then there's the concern about water systems. For non-community water systems regulated under what we call the 1700 rules, so more of that administrative code information, NCAC 18A.1700, that's the water rules, and you'll hear a lot about them during CIT and in your environmental health career. The local health department shall conduct a pre-opening evaluation at least 30 days prior to the scheduled opening day of camp to verify the water system is in compliance with Rule 3609 of this section. If the local health department is unable to meet this requirement, it has to notify the camp, and the camp shall submit the water sample to a lab certified by the North Carolina State Lab. And your your supervisor will be able to help you, I'm sure. If this has to be done, you will need some assistance figuring out what lab is approved and how they can get that sample sent in. A new ID number is issued for seasonal camp permits for each new permit or season, because those permits do expire, so they get a new ID number when a new seasonal camp permit is issued. Upon transfer of ownership of a resident camp, the department shall evaluate the facility to determine compliance with this section. And when I say this section, I'm referring to these rules. The department shall issue a permit if the resident camp satisfies all the requirements of this section. And if the department determines that non-compliant items are construction or equipment problems, they may still issue the transitional permit. That transitional permit expires 180 days after the date that it is issued, unless it gets suspended or revoked for some other rule violation. And it cannot be renewed. So once it expires, the owner or operator has to have corrected the non-compliant issues, and then they get a permanent permit, or the resident camp cannot continue to operate. The department can impose conditions on the issuance of a permit, things like the number of people served, categories of food served, time schedules to complete construction items, modification or maintenance of water supplies, water use fixtures, and sewer systems, the use of facilities for more than one purpose, continuation of contractual agreements upon which basis the permit was issued. So if something was set up, the permit was issued with the understanding that certain things would be done. Submission and approval of plans, and then other conditions necessary to remain in compliance with this section. So there can be any number of conditions placed on those permits to make sure that the operator is staying in compliance with this section of rules. I wanted to add that community water systems regulated under 15A NCAC 18C do not have to meet the sampling requirement. So it will depend on what type of water system is serving the resident camp as to whether they need a water sample submitted or not. And remember, a permit or a transitional permit may be suspended or revoked depending on what is found out of compliance with this section of the rules. A reinspection can be conducted. It's supposed to be, the rules say, within a reasonable length of time and cannot exceed 30 days. So if an operator requests a reinspection, that has to be done within 30 days. I'm so sorry because I forgot to advance that slide. I'm terribly sorry about that. I've just gone over that information. So you see an actual copy of the transitional permit form is here on this slide, and the information about the transitional permit expiring, conditions that you can impose, and the re-inspection to issue a new permit within 30 days once that is requested. Grade cards. Resident camps do get a grade card, and they are to keep that grade card posted where it is agreed upon by the environmental health specialist and the operator. It does need to be in a conspicuous location so that it can be seen by the public. And the operator can object and try to work out with you another place to put the card. Just remember, it's supposed to be conspicuous and easy to see by anybody coming into the area where people enter that camp. Inspections and re-inspections. Now we are on Rule 3605. Resident camps that operate 6 months or less per year, an unannounced inspection shall be conducted at least once during their operating season. For resident camps that operate more than 6 months per year, an unannounced inspection should be conducted at least once each 6-month operating period. So it'll be once or twice a year, depending on their operation. Upon entry into a resident camp, the environmental health specialist should identify himself or herself and state the purpose for the visit. They should inquire about the identity of a responsible person. So you want somebody to walk with you that knows what goes on and can unlock doors for you, and just in general keep up with where you're headed and what things you find that need correction or need addressing in some way. The environmental health specialist should definitely always invite that staff member to accompany them on the inspection and then offer to review the results of the inspection with that responsible person. In filling out the inspection form, points are deducted once for a single occurrence or condition existing within that camp. Deductions are based on actual violations of the rules in this section that are observed during the inspection, and you are to take 0, 1/2, or full deduction of points depending upon the severity or the recurring nature of the violation. In determining whether items of a resident camp are clean for purposes of enforcing these rules, the environmental health specialist should consider the age of the accumulated material, the relative percentage of items that are clean and not clean, cleaning practices of the resident camp, and health risks posed by the circumstances. So you are going to evaluate things based on the risk, the severity, and what you come to learn about that operation and how they run it. And there are going to be judgment calls you have to make because everything is not really cut and dried and black and white situations in these inspection situations. You really will have to assess severity and how often things are occurring and what procedures are in place in these facilities. In the case of a resident camp that requests a re-inspection for the purpose of raising their alphabetical grade, and as long as their permit is valid and in good standing, then you will make an unannounced inspection after the lapse of a reasonable period of time and not to exceed 15 days. So remember, the 30 days was about their permit's been revoked, they're requesting a re-inspection to get their permit back. That was 30 days. A re-inspection to raise a letter grade, there is a 15-day. You do not want to exceed 15 days. You want to go back and do an unannounced inspection from the time they request, sometime within 15 days. And that is calendar days, not work days. So you don't just count Monday through Friday, you count the weekends as well in that time. And I believe we've already said that you enter and identify yourself, and let's see, I will go back. Ask for someone to accompany you and go over the results. So you want to be respectful. Don't go in to a camp or any other facility that you're going to inspect. You don't go in on a power trip or not being willing to walk with a person from that operation, from that business. You want to make sure that you are respectful and professional at all times. Grading, much like the other grades that you are seeing while you're looking at these videos and what you will hear in CIT when we go over the food module. The grades are A, B, and C, and you see the breakdown of the scores there. Less than 70%, a permit is revoked and an establishment is closed, and that's the same case for the resident camps. The inspection form just captures demographics. The score part is right up there at the top. And it's very important to go over this with the operator and make sure that you have the correct information if it's an inspection of an existing camp. If it's new, then you want to capture all that information during plan review. And you want to even get the season opening and closing and the number of campers and employees. So lots of good information to capture there in the demographics. Using the inspection form, you will see the item numbers to the left, and then you will see the breakdown, the rule headings there in bold print, and the rule numbers cited out to the side, and then descriptions of what the requirements are for each heading, and then there are rule citations that go along with them, the point values for each individual violation, and you've got a space for comments, and we want you to use that. That's where you would write the things that you observe. When you get to the bottom of the sheet, you want to make sure you check whether you're attaching another comment sheet, so yes or no, and signatures and total deduction of points. We want to make sure that you fill out these forms completely. It's very important. These are legal documents, and it is important to use them and fill them out correctly. And here's some examples. You've got item number 7 and number 9 that are being marked as an observation of violations that are noted. So the demerits that are going to be taken are circled. And then in the comment section, you've got clear, concise comments about what was observed and what needs to happen. Before the inspection, just some general housekeeping things for you to remember, and this is the case for any inspection you do in environmental health. You want to review the file and see what you need to know about their wastewater and water supply, any history about previous violations, and have your equipment. Make sure you're prepared with whatever equipment you might need to do the inspection. And maybe if you're going to a camp, think about sunscreen, bug spray, wearing comfortable shoes because you might be walking over a campus. So just some extra things to think about in your equipment list. This is seen in all of our rules as well. Whenever there's possibility of exposure to or transmission of a communicable disease, the health director is to follow communicable disease laws and rules. The topography and drainage and other site factors. The reason that topography map is important is so that we can see, or you can see during plan review, where there will be activities and facilities and where there might be hazards or potential hazards in the general landscape of the facility. Water supply. This is Rule 3609, and in resident camps, water supplies have to be in accordance with our rules governing the protection of water supplies, so the 1700 rules. Water samples for bacteriological analysis from non-community supplies are to be collected by the department, so by an environmental health specialist, and submitted to the North Carolina State Lab or another lab certified, but typically it is the North Carolina State Lab that receives these, and that is to be done at least annually, so once a year, for that bacteriological analysis. Prior to the issuing of a permit, the responsible person should list non-community water supplies with the public water supply section, the Division of Environmental Health. So that information is supposed to be available so that you can know for sure what the water supply is if it's non-community or community. Cross connections with unapproved water supplies, sewage lines, or other potential sources of contamination are, of course, prohibited. Hot water heating facilities shall be provided. Hot and cold water under pressure has to be provided to food preparation, utensil and hand washing areas, and any other area where water is required for cleaning. Running water under pressure must be sufficient enough in a sufficient enough quantity to carry out all food preparation, utensil washing, hand washing, cleaning, and all other water using operations. So there has to be a good supply of hot and cold running water under pressure. And moving on to wastewater disposal, sewage and wastewater must be disposed of in accordance with the 1900 rules or the 0200 rules. So those are just more references to rules that handle sewage and wastewater disposal. If issues are noted with the on-site wastewater system, you would want to contact the supervisor or an environmental health specialist authorized in on-site wastewater protection. If you are an environmental health specialist authorized in both, in the food, lodging, and institution, as well as on-site wastewater, then you may have to deal with those issues yourself. But if you are not authorized in on-site, you want to find one of your coworkers who is to get their assistance if there's a sewage problem. Solid waste, so your trash, byproducts disposal. In resident camps, all solid waste with food scraps and other decomposable material shall, prior to disposal, be kept in leak-proof, non-absorbent containers like garbage cans with tight-fitting lids. Lids are to be kept in place unless they are cans like in the kitchen, which are being used during normal operating time, so you don't want somebody to have to keep lifting the lid to throw away paper towels, to do that constantly, because then they're constantly having to wash their hands. They never get out of that cycle. So the lids being off in a kitchen where the can is in constant use is okay. But the lid should be in place when the garbage can becomes full, or when flies and foul odor occurs. The cans are to be washed when that happens. So you want to keep a lid on them and then get them cleaned as quickly as possible if there are foul odors. Storage racks are to be elevated above the ground to store outside garbage cans. Dry rubbish like scrap paper, cardboard, or similar items shall be stored in containers as well. The rooms, enclosures, areas, and containers for this shall be adequate for the storage of all the solid waste that accumulates on the premises. The cleaning facilities, meaning the cleaning facilities for trash cans or for your dumpster, there should be a mixing faucet with hose threads, and for each container, room, or designated area to be cleaned after emptying or removal of waste. Indoor or outdoor facilities shall be provided for the washing and storage of all garbage cans and mops, so that depends on their area, what they have available, whether it's indoors or outdoors. Cleaning facilities are to include a combination faucet, so hot and cold water with a combination mixing faucet, threaded nozzle so that a hose can be attached, and a curbed impervious pad sloped to a drain. So that might be a hard plastic form like from Lowe's or Home Depot, or it might be a cement pad that's poured with sides around it and a drain that's draining properly to a municipal wastewater department or an on-site wastewater system that's approved. For cleaning of a dumpster, a resident camp can have cleaning facilities for their own dumpster, or they need a contract with a waste management company that will take that dumpster to an off-site location for cleaning or replace the dumpster. A contract for off-site cleaning constitutes compliance with this provision, and evidence of that contract is to be made available within 21 days to the environmental health specialist once requested. So it might be something that you're going to permit the camp, but they don't have their dumpster contract yet, but they can get it to you within 21 days. You might can work that out. The rule allows for that. Swimming pools can be provided, and when they are provided, they must meet the swimming pool rules, which is the 2500 rules. Camp buildings and maintenance requirements. Camp buildings and fixtures are to be kept clean and in good repair. You will hear that a lot as you're going through these videos and as you sit listening to the CIT food module. That is the general consensus of what we want for these fixtures and buildings, and that's the case in lots of our rules. We are looking for clean and in good repair, floors that are easily cleanable and non-absorbent, floor drains required when water is used for cleaning a floor or cleaning equipment where it's discharged to the floor. So the floor areas are to be enough to accommodate all activities. The walls of all the rooms are to be kept clean and in good repair. They are to be easily cleanable with washable surfaces to the highest level reached by splash or spray. So it depends on what room you're in, how much splash or spray might occur, because a bedroom would be different or a sleeping area would be different from a bathroom or from a kitchen. All rooms and areas shall be well lighted and ventilated by natural or artificial means, which shall be effective under the actual use conditions. And then lighting and ventilation equipment should be kept clean and in good repair. In a resident camp with permanent sleeping quarters, there must be cross ventilation, at least 30 inches between beds with a minimum of 6 feet between heads of sleepers, and at least one bed for every camper. Single or double level bunk beds only are allowed, and they are to be kept clean and in good repair with clean and soiled linen and clothes handled separately. Effective methods such as mosquito netting and screening and self-closing doors are also required to exclude insects, bats, and vectors. Your toilet, hand washing, laundry, and bathing facilities. All resident camps shall be provided with toilet and hand washing facilities within 500 feet of the permanent sleeping quarters. Toilet facilities shall be provided at a rate of not more than 20 campers and staff per toilet seat. Urinals may be provided for up to 1/3 of the required seats for male campers and employees. And here's an example. A resident camp with 100 females and 100 males. How many toilets are required? The females, at least 5 toilets. The males, at least 5 toilets, or 1 urinal and 4 toilets. And those are minimum requirements. They can certainly have more. Toilet, hand washing, laundry, and bathing facilities. More on this. Bathing facilities are to be provided with hot and cold running water. Lavatory facilities are to be provided with potable running water, so safe water for hand washing. Soap and individual towels or some type of hand drying device has to be provided and located conveniently to all the toilet facilities. All toilet, hand washing, and bathing fixtures are to be kept clean and in good repair. I think when I said that previous statement, it sounded like the hand drying devices have to be convenient to toilet facilities, but the point is the lavatories have to be convenient to toilet facilities. So the laundry facilities, if provided, shall be kept clean and in good repair. That's more of that statement. You know, we've already mentioned how much you will hear that throughout these rules. And the laundry area is supposed to have the means to have clean and soiled linen separated. You want to handle them separately in storage and in transporting them from place to place. I did not mean to go forward, sorry. So you want clothing, clean and soiled linen and clothing handled separately, and clean linen and clothing transported in clean containers at all times. Drinking fountains when provided. Drinking water facilities are to be provided, and if it's drinking fountains, then they have to be a sanitary angle jet design, kept clean and properly regulated so the water flow is at least 2 inches above the mouthpiece. This rule does not prohibit the pitcher service of ice water or bottled water. Premises, we're on Rule 3617 now, where we're talking about vermin control and miscellaneous things. So in resident camps, only pesticides shall be used which have been approved for a specific use and are properly registered with the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and with the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Those pesticides have to be used as directed on the label and handled and stored to avoid health hazards. The resident camp premises is to be kept clean, neat, free of litter. Animal stables, if provided, are to be located away from the main recreation center of activity, and manure is to be stored, removed, or disposed of to minimize the breeding of flies. Potentially hazardous materials like fuel, chemicals, explosives, and other things of that nature should be handled and stored to minimize health hazards if they are in use there. Protective railings, fences, or similar enclosures around the camp shall be provided and kept in good repair. And now we're getting into the food service information for this resident camp, for the resident camp rules. So Rule 3618, food service facilities, an adequate kitchen must be provided for the number of meals that will be served. The facility has to be completely enclosed and permanent construction materials used, and it must contain a dining hall with protection from the elements and the dust. If camp food service is provided by contract with an outside person or a caterer, or the camp food service is operated by an outside firm, the overall responsibility for food service sanitation still remains with the camp management. The camp management has to confirm that all food provided by an outside person is from an approved source. Field sanitation is addressed in 3619. There are often cookouts or overnight trips or similar primitive camping activities provided within a resident camp, and field sanitation standards can be used as long as they are maintained in accordance with the provision of the rules of this section. Written procedures regarding field sanitation standards should be posted or made readily available for inspection by the department, and the resident camp must ensure that the approved procedures are practiced, utilized, and maintained. So a little bit more about field sanitation. Where there's off-site food handling, there must be written procedures for cooking, controlling temperatures, and food protection measures. The temperatures in these sets of rules, the camp rules, potentially hazardous food is to be stored at 45 degrees or below for your cold storage, and 135 degrees or above for your hot holding. This is different from what you will hear in the food code, and we realize that. It is just that some of these older rules have not gone through the legislative directives or legislative changes to incorporate the newer temperatures. So 45 degrees and 135 are your cold and hot requirements. They're the expectations in these rules. Food is to be protected from contamination, just from general contamination from wherever it might come. Coolers with ice and ice packs are allowed. Potentially hazardous food cooked off-site has to be consumed or discarded within 2 hours. And to keep everything as safe as possible, poultry stuffing, stuffed meats, and stuffing containing meat, all those are not allowed in the food service and preparation for camps. So a little bit more on field sanitation. With the off-site food handling, thawing can occur. There can be frozen foods that need to be thawed, but they are to be thawed in a cold holding unit or a refrigerator at 45 degrees or less, or they can be put under potable running water that does not exceed 70 degrees, or a frozen food can be thawed during the cooking process. Unpasteurized egg products have to be cooked before they are consumed. So there cannot be unpasteurized egg that is served undercooked or raw at a resident camp. Thermometers are to be provided to check temperatures of these potentially hazardous foods. More on field sanitation. These are just the limits, the final cook temperatures that are approved for these types of food. Off-site drinking water can be from an approved source or from an off-site source as long as certain criteria are met. Off-site drinking water has to meet the following requirements. Transported can be from an approved source, transported in clean, sanitized containers and designated solely for drinking water. If it is not practical to transport drinking water for off-site activities, treatment measures have to be provided to make sure the drinking water is free from disease-causing organisms. So that water can be taken from free-flowing streams, springs, and wells. It may be taken from still sources if free-flowing sources are unavailable. and water shall be visibly clear and free from debris, trash, and organic matter. For treatment of off-site drinking water, it needs to be boiled, a rolling boil for at least 1 minute. It needs to be filtered to remove cysts and viruses, absolute pore size of 1 micron or smaller. It can be treated with 2 parts per million free chlorine residual. You know, there's little kits you can buy for when you're camping that they're I think are tablets you can drop in water to make sure that it's treated. So treated with that chlorine residual for at least 30 minutes, or 5 drops of 2% tincture iodine per liter of water. And if any of you have done camping, you know these things are available for campers to make their water safe. Well, in a resident camp, if they are going off-site to enjoy some primitive camping or some other activities away from the main camp, they may have to provide field sanitation for treatment of the off-site drinking water if they can't bring approved bottled water. So if you use tablets to clean the water, so to speak, you have to follow the manufacturer directions. Utensils and equipment are to be clean and in good repair. Food contact surfaces should be smooth, in good repair, and of an approved material. Multi-use eating utensils have to be assigned to one individual until cleaned and sanitized, so they can't just be one person using a regular multi-use utensil and then just gets washed off and handed to the next person. It actually has to be cleaned and sanitized if it's going to be passed to another person. Treated water supply must be used for cleaning of equipment and utensils, and unless a sanitizing method is provided, multi-use utensils must be cleaned and stored separately. Sorry, my slide was not advancing properly. Okay, hand washing. Hands are to be washed prior to any food handling, and that hand washing setup can be a pan with potable, clean water, soap, and single-use towels. Hair restraints are not required for food service employees in field sanitation setups, and any toxic materials do have to be labeled and stored properly. Field sanitation, waste disposal. There can be a privy, something that meets the 1900 on-site wastewater system rules. There can be written procedures for off-site disposal, and that would include digging a hole 6 inches deep with a diameter of at least 4 inches, located at least 200 feet from surface water, and then covered that hole with the waste in it, covered with soil to a depth of 6 inches. Food service employees, so Rule 3620, are to wear clean outer clothing. You got to love the picture of the person trying to hold their sneeze in. They should not use tobacco while handling food and utensils. They are to wash hands before starting work, after going to the bathroom, whenever necessary, and that's expected for them to understand that there's lots of times they need to wash their hands. Effective hair restraints are required for your food service employees in the resident camp, the main camp area, main camp kitchen. They should not come to work sick or with infected boils, wounds, anything that can contaminate food. And if they have a drink, a beverage, you know, while they're working, something to keep them from being so hot and tired and dry throat, then they have to store those drinks properly. And honestly, in case you're wondering what properly means, they should not be stored on or above a food contact surface, and they need to handle those drinks to avoid cross-contamination with food that they are preparing. Food supplies must come from approved and inspected sources and are to be wholesome, free of spoilage, and safe for the human consumption. They are to be labeled and stored separately if they have to be returned. So anything that is not acceptable to use at the camp for consumption then should be labeled and kept separate from those consumable items. Only approved containers and utensils should be used for food storage. So that would mean you do not want to put food that's going to be served to the campers and staff in a trash can that, you know, was made for holding trash or that is not a food grade container. Food protection, we have a picture here of sort of a cafeteria type line with a sneeze guard, and that is exactly what is to be placed on those types of units. Food on display has to have that sneeze guard or continuous monitoring by staff, and we do mean continuous, where they're not walking away from it. The staff member is actually staying there and watching continually to remove food, anything that might be contaminated by a customer coughing or sneezing or handling something. Food that is wrapped is also an effective protection, and contaminated food must be removed from the display as needed. Consumer self-service is allowed. Buffet-style service can be provided with protective shields, the sneeze guards on those buffet lines. Consumer self-service with clean utensils for each return trip, and that sign posted. You've seen this if you've ever eaten at a buffet type place. Please use a clean plate for each visit to the buffet. So signage must be posted about clean tableware. Family-style service at dining tables is allowed. And private events are allowed as well, as long as the potentially hazardous food is replaced every 2 hours, so consumed or discarded, and dispensing utensils are at least 2 inches above the top of the container of food. And then, of course, food is to be discarded after the event and not kept to be used another day. Food should be kept covered while in storage. It should be stored above the floor and on approved surfaces. It should be protected whenever it's transported. And we look for labeling of dry foods, individual dispensers or packs for sugar especially. There's lots of conversations sometimes about the different white powders that are in establishments, whether it's cleaning chemicals or food, dry spices, dry foods like that. So you want to make sure that things are properly labeled. And then the food is to be stored in approved areas, not under exposed sewer lines. And let me mention about the sugar that paragraph A of this rule actually states that condiments not kept in accordance with the paragraph A have to have covers and be kept covered when not in use. And then it goes into requirements on sugar, that it should be dispensed with either pour type dispensers or individual packages. So you want to read in your rules under Rule 3622 and get a handle on the different types of storage mentioned there. Milk has its little separate rule here, 3623. Grade A pasteurized milk and milk products only are allowed. Mixing of cream and milk is prohibited, and I don't know if you've already heard the summer camp rules, but the same statements occur there. So no mixing of cream and milk for service. Stored in the original container. That means the milk is to be kept in its original container. A camp can have a bulk milk dispenser, so that's the big containers with the like bag type product, bag of milk inside, and it stays sealed. And when it's put in that machine, that bulk milk dispenser, and the proper nozzle is affixed to handle the spout from the bag, then the seal is broken. And those bulk milk dispenser bags are to be labeled with the distributor name and the grade of the milk. Reconstituted dry milk, so when you're adding water to dry milk to make it usable, is to be used for cooking and baking and instant desserts only, not to be used as a real milk substitute. For communal or family-style dining, milk can be poured into glasses and cups from the 1-gallon container at the most, and remaining milk is to be refrigerated and then used for cooking only. Milk can be poured from a 1-gallon container into another container, a pitcher of maybe a quart or a pint. I'm so sorry. I read that totally wrong. Let me make a correction. Transferring milk from its original container into any type of container other than glasses or cups is prohibited, but the milk poured into the glasses and cups is not to exceed the 1-gallon container. And then any milk left over from that family-style service can only be used for cooking. So that is in Rule 36 23, and I apologize for making that mistake in the discussion. Milk stored under refrigeration is acceptable and on ice during service, but the containers are not to be submerged where the milk, think about cartons of milk. When these rules were written, probably all the cartons of milk were the cardboard type material, and there's concern that any of these containers of milk, if they get submerged in the water might could go into the where it should open. So hopefully they're sealed well and that would not happen, but that's the point of this rule. So no submerging the milk into ice, but it can be put on ice for storage during service. Ice is a food, and we are going to discuss ice handling in Rule 3624. Ice that is to be used in fountain drinks, ice water, tea, or coffee, or in connection with the chilling or serving of salads, vegetables, or other foods must be manufactured from a water supply meeting the requirements of Rule 3609 of this section. So the water has to be from an approved water supply, and all of those things I just mentioned have to be stored and handled in a sanitary manner, including the ice. Storage boxes for ice are to be covered, located away from sources of contamination, and kept in good repair and clean. Storage bins or boxes are to be provided with rims and covers to exclude spillage and drip onto the ice. Ice grinders, pans, and buckets used in preparing chipped or crushed ice shall be protected from contamination, cleaned between uses, and kept in good repair. Buckets and other containers used to transport ice also are to be stored above the floor in a clean place and kept clean and in good repair. Ice should be dispensed or transferred with a scoop, a spoon, or other sanitary method. And when not in use, that ice scoop or spoon may be stored in the ice with the handle protruding or sticking out, or that ice scoop can be stored on a clean surface. Ice scoops are not to be stored in water. Ice compartments for fountain drinks. Any piece of that equipment is to be clean and in good repair. They should be washed so that they are kept free of scum, rust, and mold, and are to be protected from drip, dust, splash, and any other means of contamination. Ice machines in general are to be kept clean. Seafood can be served at a resident camp, but it must be from an approved source. And those sources, you would want to check out the Interstate Certified Shellfish Shippers List, certification information for any crustacea that's being served, and shell stock identification tags. So they have to do similarly to restaurants in saving this information in case there was a need to trace for a foodborne illness outbreak. Shucked shellfish shipped and stored in clean single-service containers have to have the required labeling and date information on them. Reuse of shellfish containers is not allowed. And always remember, the shellfish sanitation staff with the state of North Carolina, they are a great resource when you have questions about shellfish. If you run into an issue with seafood at a resident camp, you would want to contact your regional staff with us, with the Food Protection Branch, and feel free to contact Shellfish Sanitation because they are always willing to help. This is just a sample of a shell stock tag and the information that you should be able to find on it and what to look for. And there's a handout available in the supplemental materials for CIT. More on seafood, you see the consumer advisory picture here, and that is strictly, that covers the eating of raw oysters, clams, or mussels, the information there. And then the notes to the left side telling you that shell stock can be kept at 45 or below in mechanical refrigeration. That's the requirement for it. Maintain the tags for shell stock for at least 90 days, so tags off of your oyster bags or clam bags, that kind of thing. Approved shell stock washing facilities are required. They cannot wash shell stock in a can wash. And then the reuse of shells for the serving of food has been prohibited but now is allowed by a recent law change. And that law can be looked up in North Carolina General Statutes 130A-248C3. And you can find all the information on what is required to follow that law. If raw shellfish is served, that consumer advisory signage is required. Refrigeration, thawing, and preparation of food. We're on Rule 3626 now. Potentially hazardous foods are to be held at 45 degrees or below, except during preparation and service. So there's an allowance for having food out to prepare it. It's not going to stay 45 or below when you're working with it. A thermometer is to be provided in all refrigerators, and refrigerator and freezer space must be adequate to accommodate the volume of food being handled. Thawing and preparation of food. Potentially hazardous food can be thawed in a refrigerator at 45 degrees or below under running water that does not exceed 70 degrees by cooking, or in a microwave if it's immediately cooked afterwards. So the microwave can only be used, the only difference here from what we said earlier is a microwave is added, and that's if it's immediately being fully cooked. So they can't microwave it. That might partially cook it, and that won't work as for proper thawing. They have to be microwaving it to immediately fully cook it after that thawing process. Refrigeration, thawing, and preparation of food. Proper hand washing is covered here. So prior to handling any food, and look at the sign to the right, that's an example of a sign. You might see different signs. There's some older signs that have just writing on them, but the ones with the pictures are good as well. Food prepared with the least manual contact using utensils and gloves. Equipment is to be properly cleaned and sanitized, and raw fruits and vegetables must be washed before they are cooked and served. And here's the list of final cook temperatures again. You will see this a lot in our rules. Wherever food preparation is involved, we are trying to reiterate these final cook temperatures because they're so important for you to learn for when you go about your day-to-day business inspecting food service establishments. Refrigeration, thawing, and preparation of food continued. When you're reheating potentially hazardous food, that must occur at 165 degrees. They must reach 165 degrees within 2 hours. And it can be held to a final reheat temperature of 135 if it is a food that's in an intact package from a food manufacturing plant. So the food reheating to 165 degrees within 2 hours has to deal with food that has been cooked in the facility, but then something that comes from a commercially packaging plant could be initially reheated to 135 degrees. Think about maybe chili in a bag that's not going to be opened, and it can be heated up to 135. Chili that's made in a processing plant, and then a can of it is opened, it would only need to be reheated to 135, not 165. But chili that is made in the resident camp kitchen, if that was cooled and held over to serve another day, it would need to be reheated to 165 within 2 hours. And you'll hear a lot more about reheating temperatures and the reasons behind the temperatures in the food module. A thermometer is to be provided to check temperatures of these foods. More on thawing and preparation of food. Potentially hazardous food held at 45 or below and 135 or above, because those are the temperature parameters I've already talked about earlier. 45 or below for cold holding, 135 or above for hot holding. Time instead of temperature might be allowed if it meets these criteria. A 4-hour limit for working supply of that food, 2 hours for food that's takeout only. Written procedures explaining how this time instead of temperature is in place and how it's used, and it is not allowed for raw eggs if there is a highly susceptible population being served from that kitchen. And temperatures are to be maintained during any transport of food. Let's talk about reservice. Reserving food. Food is not to be reserved from one consumer to another. However, packaged food can be reserved if it's non-potentially hazardous and the package is intact and the food is wholesome. A good example is the package of crackers, maybe your individual packages of dressing, lemon juice, that kind of thing. Those things that are in intact packages, the food is wholesome and in good shape, it's a non-potentially hazardous food, then those things can be moved from one table to another, from one camper to another. But that is the only exception. All equipment is to be clean and in good repair. You want your food contact surfaces to be smooth, easily cleanable, and approved materials for construction. The food service equipment being NSF or ANSI approved or equal applies here. So there is a requirement that equipment meet these standards, and it might have an NSF sticker, it might be certified for sanitation by ANSI, an ANSI accredited program, and then the items that are listed there this does not apply to those. Toasters, mixers, microwave ovens, and hot water heaters and hoods. So they are exempt from that NSF ANSI requirement. And this rule does not apply to limited resident camps. Remember, that was in the beginning, the limited resident camp at the beginning of our definitions. So that this rule about equipment does not apply to those limited resident camps. Shelving, tables, and counters are not to be covered with cardboard, paper, or any other absorbent material. That's a good attraction for vermin. Dining table, linens, coverings are to be clean and in good repair. Single-use items that cannot be reused. Formed buckets, aluminum pie plates, bread wrappers, number 10 cans, they are to be used only once. Then if there are containers that are hard plastic, glass, or other smooth, not corrodable, non-toxic materials, and especially things that had food that came in them, these things that are a good construction and easily cleaned, they can be reused. But they do have to be durable and easy to clean, and they shall not have held any kind of toxic materials. Multi-use eating and drinking equipment should be cleaned and sanitized after each use. Sanitizing with hot water, you are looking for the hot water to be 170 degrees or above, and the utensils should be submerged for at least 1 minute. When chemicals are used for sanitizing, the chlorine level should be at least 50 parts per million, and you are seeing a picture of a chlorine test strip being used here, and it's a little darker than the 50. Iodine at least 12.5 parts per million. Quaternary ammonia, quaternary ammonia at least 200 parts per million is the requirement for that chemical. A minimum temperature of at least 75 degrees and a testing method provided is mentioned in these rules. Typically, whatever chemical is being used for a sanitizer, there will be some information from the manufacturer. The important thing is to have a testing method for whichever way they are sanitizing. Eating and drinking utensils to be air dried after cleaning. They are not to be towel dried or cloth dried. Pans that are subjected to high temperatures, cleaning after each use is not necessarily required. Think about a pizza pan that reaches a super high temperature in a pizza oven. So, and it's reused continually for the same food. Then those are the types of utensils that can be cleaned at the end of the day, and they do not have to be sanitized. They just should be rinsed out. Food contact surfaces that are cleaned and sanitized, the requirement for those is to prevent cross-contamination. So where you've got a pan that raw chicken has been in, and then you're going to use that same pan to make a salad in, there's got to be cleaning and sanitizing between those two uses of that pan. Large food contact equipment can be cleaned and sanitized in place. Sometimes there are big kettles or mixers, things that just cannot be taken to a dishwashing machine or a sink, and spray-on or wipe-on sanitizers might have to be used. And the same thing applies, as mentioned before, that those sanitizers have to be the correct strength and properly used to cover those food contact surfaces. This is a picture of a 3-compartment sink, which qualifies as a manual dishwashing facility. So an approved 3-compartment sink with the drain boards, everything's an integral part, one piece of formed stainless steel, and the drain boards are adequate to place utensils on as needed for air drying. Sometimes you'll see racks above the sink, which that picture, I think it just got cut off, but there's a rack above the sink where providing air drying space. Separate food preparation sinks may be required based on plan review. When you find out how much or how little the camps are doing with fresh food, there might need to be a separate sink for some food prep that would be separate from the dishwashing. But you have to evaluate that through plan review. Here's an example of a dishwashing machine, and they are to be operated according to the manufacturer's information, and the data plate will tell you what you need to know in the moment when you're looking at a dishwashing machine operating. There are supposed to be drain boards on the ends of the dish machine, one side for dirty and one side for the clean dishes to come out on. There should be a countersunk sink or a sink with a faucet spray nozzle or some kind of brushes for pre-cleaning, pre-flushing, and pre-soaking of utensils that are dirty. Thermometers need to be working on the dish machine to indicate the wash and rinse temperatures. They are to be kept in good repair, and the machines are to be sufficient size to hold the number of utensils to be washed. Ware washing machines are to render equipment and utensils clean to sight and touch and provide the proper bactericidal treatment in accordance with these rules. A 2-compartment sink with adequate drain boards can be allowed where single-service items are used, so throwaway plates and forks and spoons and cups. And adequate hot water should be provided to a temperature of at least 130 degrees when chemicals are used for sanitizing, and at least 140 degrees when hot water is used for sanitizing. Hazardous or poisonous materials are not to be used for polishing, eating, and drinking utensils. So no article polish or any substance with cyanide or any type of poisonous material should be used in cleaning or polishing these eating and cooking utensils. And the picture there of the polishing of silver, that would be a little bit unusual in a resident camp, I think, but it is covered in the rule. We've already said we would not towel dry utensils, so this would be after a drying step. So you definitely do not want a chemical applied when that utensil is ready to be used and put in someone's mouth. Any cloths that are used by food service employees, so think about wiping cloths and dishcloths, are to be kept clean. After cleaning, the utensils are to be air dried, protected, inverted where possible to keep them better protected, and handled to prevent contamination. Utensils stored between uses. This is a picture of an ice cream scooper dipper well. So a running water in a dipper well is fine. Hot water at least 140 degrees is okay for utensil storage between uses. The utensils can be stored in the food product or on a clean, dry surface. So think about a line with some steam table, steam compartments where food is sitting there for service, and maybe a food employee is dipping out food to the campers and the staff. Then in between usage, while they're waiting for another shift of campers to come in, they might want to leave that utensil, that scooper, in the food, and that is okay. But they can also put it in a little compartment on the steam table that's maintaining water at 140 degrees. They can lay that utensil on the clean, dry surface of the steam table right there where they're waiting for the campers to come by again. Or the running water dipper well is also an option for your ice cream scoops. I have never seen anything other than ice cream scoops stored in those. Equipment used to store utensils should be in good repair and kept clean. Single-service utensils have to be approved construction, stored in an approved location and protected, and then when opened, stored in an approved dispenser or kept in that plastic sleeve in self-service areas where people just grab one and that next one is all that is available coming up out of the sleeve. Here's a picture of some dry storage in a food service area. So we want to see it free of insect and rodent harborages or signs of insects or rodents, kept clean. Storage is to be 12 inches above the floor if it's stationary, but it can be 6 inches above the floor if it's portable. And wheels are not required. We're just thinking about something easy to move. A shelf that can easily be picked up. A dolly with wheels is fine, or maybe it's just a simple shelf, one level shelf or step stool kind of thing where it's easily moved. Shelving should be at least 1 inch from the walls unless the equipment is sealed to the wall, and non-absorbent wooden shelves that are in good repair can be allowed. Lighting in food service areas does have foot candle requirements, so at least 50-foot candles on food preparation and utensil washing work levels, 10-foot candles at 30 inches above the floor in all other areas, and that's not a lot of light. It's pretty dim actually, so it's not a heavy burden on these camps to provide great light except for food preparation and utensil washing areas. Fixtures for lighting are to be kept clean and in good repair. Wherever exposed food will be present, light bulbs should be shielded with like a plastic shield, usually covers them, or shatterproof. What you're seeing in the picture is the full shield over several bulbs, but you might even see individual bulbs that have a tube shield on them, or they'll be stamped with a marking that notes that they are shatterproof. Lighting, if you need to measure it, should be done using a calibrated light meter. Food service area ventilation is to be kept clean and in good repair. There's a picture of a hand washing sink, a lavatory in a food service area, and there must be a hand washing sink in food preparation and utensil washing areas. It must have hot and cold water, a mixing faucet so that the hot and cold water can mix, soap, individual towels, or another approved hand drying device, and there has to be at least one lavatory in the kitchen. Other sinks outside of the kitchen cannot be used. Other sinks in the kitchen cannot be used for hand washing, like the 3-compartment sink or the food preparation sinks. The dump sink for the dish machine, those are not to be used for hand washing. And the sinks should be kept clean and in good repair. Toilet facilities have to be provided within 500 feet of the camp kitchen. They are to be located so that campers do not pass through the kitchen. And you will see a very familiar statement about floors and walls needing to be clean and in good repair and non-absorbent. There must be a hand washing sign posted. Doors are to be self-closing where the doors open. They're not required for toilet rooms that open into the interior of a building, and the exterior doors of the building are self-closing, but otherwise toilet rooms are to be provided with self-closing doors so that they can try to keep the area free of flies. Windows are to be screened also to try to keep the area free of flies, and of course keeping the fixtures clean and in good repair and not storing other things in the bathroom. So nothing but toileting supplies. Toilet paper is okay, but no other supplies should be stored in the toilet facility. Floors of food service areas, clean and in good repair, non-absorbent and easy to clean. That's required in the food preparation areas and the utensil washing areas. Carpet can be used in wait stations, self-service areas, and dining rooms. Coving, which is the kind of the baseboard material at a floor wall junction, so the crack where the floor and the wall join, you want to have some kind of protection there to prevent that opening where pests could come in. It would make a great harborage for pests to live, and it's just hard to clean. Once water or splash of any type gets in that joint, that contributes to the deterioration of the physical facilities. So you want to see baseboard, some kind of coving at that junction. Floor drains are required wherever flood type cleaning is used. Walls and ceilings, similar message here, clean and in good repair, smooth and washable. Food preparation areas, utensil washing areas, and wait station bars where beverages are prepared and utensils are washed. You want to have a smooth, washable surface wherever this is going on. A washable finish is not required in a dry storage room because you don't expect there to be splash on the walls and ceilings of those areas. And then a little miscellaneous information. Rule 3638, we are nearing the end. I know this has been a long presentation. I appreciate you all bearing with us. No camp activities in private living areas. And then the pack out and trip kitchens can occur. That happens sometimes where food is portioned and stored for cookouts or overnight trips. And when utensils and equipment are not returned to a central kitchen for cleaning and are not located in the same building as that camp kitchen, then that place has to have at least a 2-compartment sink with 24-inch drain boards or countertop space at each end to handle those dirty items and air dry clean items. And the sinks have to be sufficient size to actually hold the utensils and equipment that will be used. And any area where food is portioned has to be equipped with a separate hand washing lavatory with a hot and cold mixing faucet and the soap and individual towels. Residential style educational activity kitchens with non-commercial utensils and equipment may be used by groups of 32 or less campers and staff to prepare meals only for the members of that group. Field sanitation measures from Rule 3619 would be put in place to be used in these situations. And a little more miscellaneous information. Soiled linens and aprons should be stored in containers. Laundered table linen, so clean table linen, if used, should be stored in a clean location. Chemicals are to be properly labeled and stored. Storage spaces are to be provided for cleaning supplies, miscellaneous supplies like that. And everywhere they should be taking measures to prevent pests. If that means putting up fans, implementing screens, and self-closing doors, pests are to be prevented in the resident camp. Pesticides used must be EPA and NCDA listed and properly stored. So all of this refers to the kitchen premises, but you've already heard it also regarding the other areas of the camp. So just being consistent through the rules with those requirements. Live animals are not allowed in food preparation, storage, or dining areas. And that's a sad little puppy dog with his bowl wanting to come in. They are allowed in areas not used for food preparation, and you might see fish or crustacean in display tanks. You might see patrol security dogs and service animals, and those are the types of animals that are allowed, as long as their presence does not result in the contamination of equipment, utensils, linens, and unwrapped single-service and single-use items. So there's some stipulations on how they can appear in the facility. And then just like all of our rules that I'm sure you're seeing this everywhere, there's an appeals procedure, an informal review process, and appeals procedure whenever there's a disagreement. So we want you to be aware that it's our duty to share the process for requesting an informal review and appeal. And you will learn that over time about how to make sure that you're sharing that information properly, because operators do not have to agree with the environmental health specialist every time, and they do have a path that they can take when they want to go through an appeal. And now we are at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions regarding this presentation, please contact your regional specialist. We will be glad to try to assist and answer any questions that came up that were not answered throughout this presentation. I appreciate your attention, and I hope that you have a great day.